Hello, as always, Masha tells you stories and welcomes you to a new talk. I say thank you to my fantastic supporters who make me grow and include new things into my practice to showcase and share with you. So today I demonstrate an introduction to a long-term stitching story that combines the stitching practice and painting practice, and actually it celebrates the beauty of spring, its wonderful blossoming and the birds returning to their nesting homelands. Though, for example, the white pheasant featured in the design is not like a typical bird for many territories, so and actually it doesn't show a rich migratory geography, so it remains a beautiful example of any bird that gives us a chance to enjoy, for example, and draw and paint in many designs. And well, usually, so it really takes place in the oriental designs that we're going to observe today. So I offer you a stitching exercise that I'm going to share within the coming month or even a little bit more. So, and there we're going to meet lots of examples of traditional approaches typical for Chinese painting, especially painting with watercolors, and lots of designs that we can meet in, for example, in wallpapers brought to Europe in the 19th and 18th century. So, and I really enjoy finding lots of information about it, and I really feel fascinated to share it with you. So, and actually I came up with the idea to highlight the tradition of Chinoiserie painting, especially so the tradition of using the elements brought from China to Europe, so in order to introduce the beauty of the East. So because, well, recently we came across different examples of it, so and I thought that it would really be a nice exercise and a nice way of observing beauty in real world. So actually Chinoiserie in Europe came as a European expression of fascination of Chinese art. So because actually, so Chinoiserie is a European artistic style that emerged in the 17th century. And actually, so it is characterized by the imitation and romanticized interpretation of Chinese beauty. And actually the Eastern beauty and Eastern perception of beauty. So, and the word itself was derived from French word chinois, which is just like Chinese. So Chinoiserie is just like a Western interpretation of Chinese motifs and the techniques as well. So as always, I have brought you the quote, which somehow paints the idea that we're going to discuss and highlight today. So, and if you look at ancient Chinese painting, you see mountains, but they are not real mountains. So it's just something that artists imagined. And actually, if we observe the traditional examples of Chinese paintings, especially watercolors, like Gunbei painting, so we can find lots of examples of not real flora, not real sites of gardens and so on and so forth, but so something that artists imagine, something they try to recreate and paint on a piece of silk paper or just rice paper. So, and I think that, well, many works that were brought from China and India, so during the time of 17th and 19th centuries, so they were not real works, they were just imagined beautiful pictures. So, and I think that, well, this is a kind of approach we're going to use in our practice. So actually, Europeans discovered this part of the world and they were really fascinated with these beautiful scrolls of paintings. So they were really dreaming about something different, something that really can improve or maybe just bring some new air to their traditional perception of art. So that's why, well, more and more things that were brought to the European countries from China and India, so they were just making the diversity, and they really made a huge change in the perception of European art, and actually so the new approaches that European artists use in their everyday practice. Well, so maybe, so some of you have seen some examples of the Oriental works of art, especially so those which exhibited in the museums and galleries. So many of them have very particular, very specific characteristics. So now I'm going to just show some of them. So because the key characteristics of, well, many Chinoiserie paintings and many chinoiserie arts. So they're using of rich ornamental and decorative elements. So usually, this is just a beautiful picture of the imagined East. So as I have just showed you in the quote in the first page, in the first slide, so just like the imagined beauty, not a real one. So just like the way that Europeans imagined East. So it's wonderful gardens, they're just beautiful sights, and absolutely adorable flora and fauna. So, and typically there were popular forms that were decorated with this type of paintings. So there were furniture, ceramics, textiles, and wallpapers. So they were very ornate, they were very decorative, so they were very delicate and highly decorative things. So, and if we just see the palette, so the palette actually was rich in color, and actually there are lots of examples when the palette is very pastel and very mute, but actually at the same time there are lots of examples when, for example, we see that the colors are incredibly shiny, and so there are lots of examples when gold and silver and some shimmering materials are used. Now let's also think, so how we personally can use these elements in our creative practice, because there are lots of examples when, for example, wallpapers and lots of decorative elements were used in order to ornate and decorate the interior, and at the same time, the same beautiful Eastern motifs, they were brought to decorate fashion, for example. So lots of beautiful dresses, lots of beautiful gowns, and fashion accessories that were embellished with the elements particular for Oriental fashion. And so some of them, they also demonstrate a very cultural context, because chinoiserie is a form of art that, was sort of cultural appropriation. It's, a Europeanized representation of Chinese culture, so potentially overlooking the original context, and the creators, because chinoiserie flourished during the time of increased trade between Europe and Asia, and particularly through the East Indian Company, so lots of exotic things were brought to Europe. So, and some of them were deeply rooted in Western tradition, but actually lots of Western merchants, so they were so much fascinated with the mystery and elegance of the culture taken from the East. So that's why they tried to combine the ordinary things used in Europe, for example, with the beautiful examples of art taken from India, China, Japan, in other Eastern countries. And so if we just see the cultural context, so here we have the example of the wallpaper, that features the beautiful and elegant designs, and beautiful embellishment of just incredible showcase of flora and fauna. So, and how about the cultural context? So, and traditional things that highlight the beauty of chinoiserie. So, because, chinoiserie was typical during the increase of trade between Europe and the eastern part of the world. So actually, somehow it reveals the colonial fascination, because the countries that somehow tried to colonize the eastern part of the world, so they tried also to take something from their background, something from their culture, in order to demonstrate the mixture and the interconnection of European countries and the Eastern countries. So, and actually, if we see how other things were also just popularized through this increase of cultural exchange, we also can find that not only wallpapers were typical in this interchange. So because here we have an example of Chinese porcelain. So, and somehow some of the elements, maybe even not the elements, but the colors, also can remind us of the traditional Delft porcelain, Delft ceramics, originated in Denmark. But actually, these white and blue palette, these white and blue motifs, inspired by finely made Xinhua ceramics, particularly in China. And during the Ming Dynasty, the blue and white porcelain actually amazed the merchants, that were just trying to take some very exquisite things from China. So, and afterwards, this influence really changed the perception of Europeans that tried to apply these beautiful palette, this beautiful approach to decoration of ceramics to European market. So, and the next one, is wooden and carving, actually, and actually there are lots of examples of woodwork, so which is just like a very traditional for Chinese craftsmen. So especially Chinese-inspired furniture designs often incorporate Chinese style of decoration, carving, and using wood and lacquer, and actually lots of inlaid elements, for example, made with shells. So in Chinoiserie influenced garden design also, and while lots of examples which were used for decorating wooden elements like furniture, they were also featuring the designs taken from flora and fauna, and some of, for example, furniture works, they featured the beautiful elements that somehow highlight the beauty found in the gardens and in the forests, and lots of flower elements. Well, and all this flower beauty will also bloom in textiles, because, well, Europeans were fascinated with the meticulous work of the Oriental artist, worked with fiber and thread. So, and they also tried to take something, so to balance their traditional interpretation of beauty with some beautiful aesthetics taken from the East. So, and actually together they gave a push to grow a new style, which got this name like we know it, like Chinoiserie. So because, well, somehow it was incorporation of elements typical for Rococo style, and so very beautiful approach to these like Western and Eastern way of perceiving beauty, really gave a push and give it a grow to this style that we observe today. Well, yeah. And well, actually, so if we just think about some examples of Chinoiserie, so it is very important to mention that lots of artists that were trying their hand in applying this artistic approach in their works will also try to, well, see their own way and to demonstrate their own way of perceiving this art. So, and it would not be optional to mention the name of François Boucher. So he was a prominent French artist, prominent French painter. So he created works like the Chinese Garden. So here's the first picture in the slide. And well, he tried to blend European aesthetics and European art techniques with some imagined Chinese beauty. So, and actually all his works, they have a very beautiful allure, so, and somehow the breath of some Orientalism. So, and these pictures, they feature lady and boys, for example, which serve them. So they're just Chinese boys. They look like Chinese boys. And well, at the same time, we see the fascination of Chinese mood, Chinese style, and maybe it's sort of like Chinese background, which is presented in both of these pictures. So, and what is particular about Boucher's decor? And so actually these artists, and well, so through his style and through his just marvelous works, he tried to idealize the look and the beauty of Chinoiserie. So at that time of his epoch, so he was very popular, and actually he was just like an ambassador of Chinoiserie art. And well, he was a favorite artist of Madame Pompadour, and he was her favorite painter, and he somehow reinvented the pastoral motifs, so and enchanting scenes of sentimental love. Well, the next one is Sir William Chambers. So he was an English architect, and he's very famous for a series of architectural creations that represent the fascination of Englishmen inspired with the architecture particular for China. So, and many works that he created so were really placed all around England, and one of the most important and actually prominent one is the Pagodet Kew Gardens in London, and he popularized the style through the designs of buildings and decorative arts inspired by his personal experience in China, because he traveled there in order to gain the feeling, to gain the mood, and somehow to bring this mood through his own eyes, so to England. Well, the next one, Jean-Baptiste Pima. So he's known for his engravings and paintings. So actually he's just like a revolutionary artist, and because, well, he just popularized Chinoiserie themes across Europe. So, and actually he influenced lots of artistic spheres, especially he was very influential in textile and porcelain. So, and especially known for his elaborate Chinoiserie approach of floral motifs, which used for printing. So, and actually all his works were particular for printing in different types of materials. So because he adapted lots of medias like textile, porcelain, furniture and wall panels. So, and even small items that people used at that time, like snuff boxes and like small items like fans, they were also decorated with the traditional motifs really loved in Europe at that time. Well, but how about visual examples that still can be found nowadays? So because we just look through the artistic works like canvas and oil paintings and drawings, but how about real things that, well, lots of people can visit today? So in here we have the yellow drawing room in Buckingham Palace that can be visited. So if just person has a chance to go and just buy a ticket, so it's really accessible nowadays to see it in the flesh. So and actually, so visual examples of these like incredible styles, so particular all over the Europe, for example, and this drawing room so was very special because it was created because King George IV, so he was a very fan of Chinoiserie art. So and actually, he just tried to make the room filled with the beauty of the Orient. So in order to celebrate the blossoming and the garden story, so not outside the palace, but inside it. So and actually, so this yellow room is also very particular because during the time when Napoleon III stayed with the state visit in Buckingham Palace, so this room was completely covered with yellow silks because he was just a person who adored yellow color, like sun golden color. So and all these wallpapers were covered with this yellow gold. Well, and other place which is also a celebration of Chinoiserie art. So again, thanks to George IV, the King George IV. So because, well, he was just the patron of this style all over UK and England. So this beautiful place is in Brighton Pavilion, so Royal Pavilion. And actually, so here we see not like a subtle and very fine and mute palette of the painting, but actually bright and very vibrant. So just like very different type of the color palette, but still, so there is a very natural and very exquisite way of celebrating the beauty of Chinoiserie. So, but actually, all the story has many twists. So, and if you're very curious about it, so it's really easy to find the sources of inspiration all over the internet and actually the stories which is behind these beautiful designs. So, but what is special about the drawings? What is very special about the wallpapers? So, because actually these type of works, these type of textiles actually and paper works, they're very different from what we got used nowadays. So because they also contain some textile side and paper side because, well, it really has a very rich and very specific history because they consist of two layers. One is rice paper, which is just like background, and another one, a face side or just like a right side, is made of a very fine Chinese silk, which is painted actually. And together they're glued with a very special glue made of starch. And well, actually this process gives the fabric like sort of like roughness and flexibility, and at the same time this wallpaper at this point like being glued together so gains body. And then so afterwards, this piece of paper and actually wallpaper gets dry, so it is get prepared to painting. And there is an interesting fact about them. For example, Chinoiserie during its history experienced the time of rise and actually decline. And firstly, well, huge European ships brought these type of wallpapers to Europe, hand-painted wallpapers from Guangzhou, where it was just like a cradle of wallpaper painting workshops. So, and then Europeans discovered less expensive road and less expensive destination. So during the time of East India trade, so hence they gained the name Indian papers. So they were less luxurious, they were less bright, and maybe at the same time less expensive. So, but actually, lots of traders, they tried to somehow to economize the money and somehow to substitute these luxurious works with something else. Well, and actually, so the papers wallpapers gave exclusivity to tea rooms and cabinets, and somehow they represented the delicate taste and the very intellectual ambitions of the owners of these cabinets decorated with Chinese wallpapers. And they were really expensive, but at the time of the 19th century, so due to many factors like wars and starvation in Europe, and actually the year without summer, which really caused a starvation, so revolutionized the use of money all over Europe. So people tried to stick to economy and not just spend money for very just expensive things. And by the end of the 19th century, so the popularity of Chinese wallpapers just came almost to the minimum. But actually by the end of it and by the beginning of the 20th century, so old fashions gradually returned. And people tried to stick to some new ideas of maybe reinventing this old tradition of decorating their houses with some beautiful things. Thus, so John Lay the Cathay just tried to collect all this expression of Chinoiserie art. So somehow he tried to imitate the beauty that Chinoiserie wallpapers demonstrated. And somehow, it was like a new way of feeling Chinoiserie art, so a new way of reading its aesthetics. At the same time, so these wallpapers appeared more affordable, so they were cheaper, but they were different. Less opulent, less bright, and actually a little bit faded. Somehow they also just have their original aesthetics because they featured traditional architecture, so some sort of like the motifs that were popular all over Europe, and somehow the motifs that were particular for Chinese art. But at the same time, so they appeared a little bit different. Numerous workshops tried to imitate this art, and the designers strived to make a sort of Chinese paintings, but not like real them. And some of them really succeeded. So one of them was Soho Square Studio, which collected wallpapers, like original wallpapers made from China, from different corners of Europe, and somehow they framed them and used them as separate decorative panels. And some of them really served lots of time and were used even today as the visual example for many great producers, as a reference, as a visual reference to create new things. One of them is de Gournay, so that appeared in the end of the 20th century, and Fromental also, and they really beautiful works. Their bespoke wallpapers gain incredible popularity all over the world, and they really create luxurious settings in private homes and hotels and restaurants and shops all over the world. And actually, so they're painted and embroidered things. So many designs are drawn from actually scenic Chinese wallpapers of the 17th century that, had a chance to survive during like stormy years of 17th and 18th and 19th centuries. And actually, so they also represent a real authentic beauty of China, and actually the way that Europeans perceived this beauty and try to spread all over the world. But so if we look at the particular elements of the design, so what is so special? Why? So they are just incredibly popular nowadays, and what is so much like beautiful about them? So here we have like lots of visual examples of them. So some of them are embroidered with fine silk, some of them are painted, and so somehow it can remind us of some classical Chinese embroideries. Like 1,000 birds that I showed you recently in some of our previous talks. And the key element of all Chinoiserie style painting is like bird, flower, and so exquisite handwork. So the design that draws inspiration from expert art, blending European fantasy with some sort of Eastern motifs. So here we have some key features like delicate botanical scenes, flourishing trees and blossoms that create lush and dreamy landscapes. There are lots of portraits, because here we have like portraits of animals and animal figures, and some can found people. So the next picture will demonstrate the people. So, and here we have like exotic birds and animals like peacocks, pheasants, monkeys, and even deer. So, and they often appear like adding narrative and charm and the feeling of visiting some fantastic place, not like a real place. So again, we return to fantasy. Well, and if we see the figures in the garden, so there are lots of like moods that idealize the beauty of nature, and somehow it really evokes a feeling like of idyllic scenes of leisure. A particular setting of some, well, maybe a garden, beautiful garden of Eden, and with like a traditional garden, like full of birds and beautiful things like found usually in spring. And also there are lots of very exquisite details that we can find in this. So because a part of painting, a part of embroidery, there are also like very shiny elements that give a kind of like royal beauty to any type of wallpapers, because soft pastel colors have a kind of like opposite side because they are balanced with golden shine and silver shine. So this really gives the whole display like incredible, like magnificent and very dreamy look. Because when you see at this type of painting, this type of wallpaper, you really understand that it's not like a real earthy place, because it's just like a dreamy, marvelous land of dreams. Well, because gold and metallic foil are wonderful addition of depth and light and elegance. So because, well, actually tastes are different, but so if we observe this type of wallpaper and this type of art, so we understand that at this type of painting, so gold and silver shine can live. Well, and now let's have a look at the color palettes and color schemes that I try to find for today, because they really represent the snapshots of some natural place. So, and I try to find there some combination that really can highlight the very mute and very pastel colors, so to balance it and somehow to bring it closer to the palette that I used for the design that I'm going to highlight today. So here we have the example of some seaside and some natural elements like birds and herbs and grass. And we somehow rely on the three key element colors. And so the using of these like three basic colors is very just like a nice thing to stick to, because it doesn't really distract the attention. And well, we try to follow this like golden rule in order to make everything sound in tune. And I think that for any type of art project, so keeping in mind that three colors are just the basic players, just like a trinity, golden trinity. So just like a thing that we really need to follow and just try to keep in mind. Well, and so how about the color palette and any mixing rules? Because, well, choosing the colors just one side, but even working with colors like practically is just absolutely different, because so we should never take the color just straightforwardly from the tube, because in this case, so the picture and the painting that we're going to have is gonna look like just like very childish. So if we observe the colors and try to somehow exercise the way that we feel about them, so it's better just to take every color from our painting set and get acquainted with it. So to use paper at first and apply each color separately, and afterwards add there a portion of white color, or maybe add their burnt umber and try to wash it and understand so how these additional colors work with the primary colors, because afterwards we will understand that so taking the color straight from the tube, so it doesn't really let us feel and sense this color in full, because if we look at the world and how nature applies colors, so we can see that, well, it really works absolutely differently, because there are no absolutely like clean colors in the surroundings. So all the colors that we see is just like the mixture. So that's why we really need to keep this in mind. So, and to add there some like portions of brown, black, and white sometimes, in order to get, well, a very exquisite, so very natural kind of like misty or washed palette. So, and to play with the shades and try to exercise our art of seeing and art of painting, observing natural colors, observing the colors that we have in our paint set. well. And how about the composition? So because composition is another crucial thing that we really need to pay attention to, because if we see how, for example, in the works of Chinoiserie art, the composition makes the mood and actually tries to demonstrate the featuring heroes. So we also can really find some examples that, well, the artists who created these beautiful wallpapers, they were maybe trying to somehow to take the reference from the iconic pictures on, for example, display in Sixtine Chapel or somewhere, because, well, lots of the examples that I try to maybe use as reference for this presentation, they also have some maybe hidden elements of, for example, the utilizing of golden ratio, or maybe some elements that really give us a sort of balance and free space, for example. So also just give us a chance to find the beautiful balance between fullness and emptiness. So we should not create the design, if we do it ourselves, and to feel all the free space with flowers and with twigs and leaves and birds and animals, because, well, in this way, so we are going to have a picture of horror vacua, because, well, we will know place in the design, so to breathe. So that's why, so rely on the classical way of organizing composition. So, and in case if there's difficulty, just observe the beautiful examples of classical art to understand so where to place the elements and how to play with them and how to just get the inspiration from this. Because, well, real world has lots of well, beautiful examples of using some compositional elements that we can just maybe peep into and just see and apply in our works. So especially natural world, as for example flora, has also beautiful examples of organizing the space, and that's why we really need to observe it. So because the human eye is always in search of balance and beauty, and when we see limited color palettes or maybe limited compositions, we also try to find the most bright elements. And so these elements give us a chance to exercise and give us a feeling of maybe perfect balance. And, well, I think that we really need to be very attentive to find this balance in the surrounding and in our world. But so there also the time so to approach to the design that I'm going to demonstrate to you. So, well, this is the story of the echoes of the East. So in the color palette that I choose to use, well, just like 3 primary colors that I use in this design is white, blue, cobalt blue, and brown, like burnt umber. And I also use their foil. So at the point now, I understand that it's gonna be silver or maybe tarnished silver. And also just in the middle of the design, I'm going to place a piece of a mirror. So, and all this design is going to be framed. And actually the elements of bird, flowers, twigs, and branches, they're going to be painted on the blend of linen and viscose, which really makes the look very shimmering, very luxurious, and somehow it really serves like an imitation of blend of linen and silk, and at the same time it has really nice and very beautiful shine, and together with the painted surface they really make a beautiful cocktail and very beautiful balance. And all the elements that are demonstrated in these designs, they are going to have some very touch and very slight and beautiful accents of embroidery, because the bird is going to be slightly embroidered because they are going to be embroidered wings and a little bit of tail and beautiful flowers that somehow also just interrogate between one another. They are going to communicate between one another because, well, just the tiny flowers echo the bigger flower, and the twigs, they are just like a bit in the background and they serve the background of the composition. And I feel, well, so all together they play in tune, and, well, this type of beautiful talk that they have can also give us a chance to exercise our creative practice and maybe to polish our skills. So, and I think that for many of you, maybe it's just like a very inspiring, and well, just like a time when you can try something new. Especially for me, it's a moment when I try to just exercise my skills, something that I haven't done before. So that's why. So I welcome you to stitch and paint this project together, because at this moment I have only the render of it, so just like a digital render. Well, and I also have a sampler which I made for our today's presentation. So here it is. So some of the parts of these designs just painted, and some of them are slightly embroidered. So you can see how the light lets the surface shine. So the peony is embroidered all over the edges of petals, and the heart of the flowers here embroidered with French knots, and the wings of the bird. So you can see how they shine because they are covered with a series of satin stitches. Well, and I welcome you so to do the same thing together. So because, well, nature is the best companion for us. So, and nature gives us lots of inspiration. So if we observe it in the question of composition, in the question of choosing the best palette for our designs and our creative exercises, lots of things can be found there. So when painting or drawing, some of us use the designs that, well, we try to take straightforwardly from natural sites, while sometimes we apply some elements in order to exercise our creative art of seeing. And actually most of these works really give us a chance to push our creativity. But so how about the materials? So what materials we are to use to recreate this? So as I have already told you, so for the background I used linen blend with viscose, so which I fused onto the blizzling non-woven material in order to give it stability and, well, some sort of like body, so in order to make it a little bit thick. And how about the paints? So originally watercolors made in China, Gunbi painting, so they are made on silk background. So and Chinese artists use watercolors which are a bit different from the traditional watercolors used in Europe. So that's why I offer you to use all-purpose acrylic paint. So you can use Winsor & Newton or maybe some other producers of the best artistic paints that you can find in shops. So so to apply these colors onto the background, so the best way to use Chinese brushes, but if you don't have any, so you can use ordinary brushes or maybe synthetic ones that imitate the organic hair. So well, you particularly will need 2 brushes to work, so the same size, so and one very fine brush to use for very fine and tiny details. Well, and so the rule of using the color is just the same that I highlight. So never take the paint straightforwardly from the tube. So add the mixtures and exercise your art of painting firstly on paper. So because I'm going to share the pattern, so if you're really feeling insecure with painting straightforwardly on paper or drawing the pattern, so you can use the patterns that I share in my feed. Also going to use the full design for the frame, and so you can also do it in your tempo and your pace, so and do it step by step gradually. Well, and now let's just see a little bit closer, so how these designs and these patterns demonstrate as the delicate botanical scenes. So because here there is key elements that we are going to meet in the design. So there is a plum blossoming branch, so that also half painted and half embroidered. So the hearts of the flowers embroidered with French knots, and the shadow part embroidered with short and long stitches and a series of French knots. So, and this type of accentuated work, I mean the series of stitches, gives the work sharpness. And so if you feel insecure adding the sharpness to the painting using brushes, so don't hesitate, don't be afraid, and use just stitching, because stitching will give the sharpness to the design. So peony flower is the particular flower that we see in our gardens in spring. So that's why I used to use this in the design. So, and I find it really nice expression of the spring blossoming. And while thinking about the way to realize the petals, I thought that it would really be looking nice. So if balance the painting with stitching. So that's why the setting the stitches all over the petals and putting the stitches in a radiant way, so also give this beautiful flower some additional shine and additional charm. And the bird, so here we have a pheasant, well, just like a very rare bird because it's white. At the same time, there are different shades of white, because one white is just like milky white, and another is with a little bit grayish color, and together they really give a really nice and silvery and white look to this bird. Well, and I just like it. So, and also there are different types of branches. So the branch which the bird perched onto is very just rough, and so the body of the branch really has just like the mixture of painting and stitching. So that's why, so we feel the image and illusion that, so this branch is really very natural, so it really has a very nice finish, like tactile finish. And in the background there is a bamboo, and in the exercise we are going to also have the bamboo with painting and stitching. So, and the sharpness of the bamboo branches and twigs is also reached because not only with painting but also with the series of stitches that really paint the shadow and paint the light in this branch. Well, so now I think it's the time for the exercise. Here we are going to find some details on how to approach the painting, so how to make up some sketches and how to practice applying colors. So I think that so it would not be optional to mention some of the tricks and techniques of how to, and maybe to answer some questions that you may have. So now let's observe it. Here we have our first exercise, but before we start the practice, let's have a look at the iconic images of Chinese painting, some of the similar elements we're going to meet in the embroidery design that we're going to have in our working space just in a while. So actually there are lots of elements that I tried to use as the reference, so taken from this book. And well, the first one, the most recognizable, is the plum blossom. So actually, the intensity of colors of the flower groups is balanced with the contrasting color of the foliage. And actually the branch, so it just stands at some sort of distance because it looks very translucent and kind of like fading. So, and it really serves a nice background for the flowering composition. And actually the flowers, so if we look how they are realized, so they also have sort of like a gradient way of painting. So, and these really make them look very dimensional and very natural at some point. Well, so now another thing is the peony flower, and I also just tried to use this in the composition for the painting and for embroidery that we're going to have. And well, just they're like a beautiful hero. So, and this image demonstrates a technique that we also should keep in mind, and especially while coloring the petals and while looking at the design. So we really need to pay attention to the way that edges are realized, because they are slightly contoured while the base of the petal retains some shadow. And actually in the design, in the embroidery design, we are going to have the edges of the petals stitched slightly, and the areas so very just close to just the base of the petals, so they will remain in the shadow and in a slight darkness. Well, the next is branch. And it's very like naturalistic because it has the structure, and the cork is very similar to the way that, well, real branches just live in the garden. So it's not like a totally plain. It has some unevenness, holes and bumps actually. So, and also just on one side there is a shadow, and on the other side there is a place where there is light. The surface is very uneven, with holes and with the roughness that branches usually have. And the same about petals, because here we have the nice example of the petals that we can just use in our painting. Because, well, the same as with the branches with the plum tree, so the close to the viewer petals and leaves, they're more intense, they're more contrast, and so comparing to the petals and the leaves which are just close to the background, so they're more neutral, they're not so sharp, and they're not so very well detailed. Well, and so here we have the one more example with the leaves. So in here we have just the leaves which are more closer to the viewer, so they're more dark and so they're more detailed. So we can also trace the contour of them, and so if we just see how they are painted, so they're very contrastive and they're very nice drawn. And so here we have a very close look on the leaves because, well, we try to make our leaves look in that way. So because the leaf has two halves and it is open like a book, so and according to their texture and so according to the way that so the leaves are given and demonstrated in this picture, we're going to just realize the way that actually our leaves are going to be. The leaves which are close to us, so they are more finely made, and especially the leaves which so here appear a bit at a distance, so they are less detailed, they are less contrastive, and especially the reverse side of the leaf, which is slightly turned out from the viewer, so it also has a bit faded look, and it's not so sharp, it's not so bright and contrastive. And so here there is also an example of the leaves, which I find as a very nice reference for painting. So because here there are really nicely drawn veins, and well, actually the texture and the color really looks fantastic. And one more hero of the composition is the bamboo. Well, I just think that it's very easy and actually the most nice and very well painted thing in the whole design. So especially because, well, it's really easy to draw, very easy to paint and color, because it just has very straight lines, and somehow it reminds the shape and the construction of human bones, because it also has joints and it's so straight, and somehow we can really have no trouble with painting it at all. So, but the thing which we really need to remember, keep in mind, is just the structure of the bamboo, because it has sort of like grips, well, like a pencil. So if we just touch it and scratch it, we understand that. So the texture of the bamboo twig, so it's very ribbed. So that's why while painting it, we also need to draw the shadow and indicate with very fine brush the lines, the straight lines that are going so in the shadow, and also just do some sort of highlighting in the place where the light should give it some accents. But so here that's finished with references, and well, so we go on with practice. Well, actually, if you are not very confident with painting and with drawing yourself, you can upload the pattern, so which I shared in my feed, and you can just print it out and trace it on watercolor paper, because at first I recommend you to practice on watercolor paper instead of just painting in a piece of textile stretched in a frame. So because it really can help you with practicing and with polishing your skills, especially painting skills. So first of all, I think that it's the best way to practice with a branch. Well, and so while drawing it, so if you draw it yourself, try to imitate the natural looking branch. I mean, like try to make it just the same as it can really look or appear in the garden. So have not really straight, not really geometrical construction. So find some place where the leaves should set. So if we just see how the branches look, if we just try to look out of from our window, we can notice that so in the bottom of the branch the leaves are slightly larger than at the top side. So we can follow in the curve. And draw the leaf. Well, and on the other side, here we are. Yeah. So we're going to use 3 types of brushes, especially so the one which is the finest. So I use synthetic brushes here while painting, but when I do some watercolors, I use Chinese brushes. So one I use for applying color, or if I paint with ink, so I just use it for soaking the brush in the paint, and afterwards I just spread it in my paper. So and another one, so to spread the color, so it always should be dry or maybe slightly moisturized. So in order just to spread the excess of paint, or somehow if I really need to just clean it away, so I also use it, and so it helps me very well. But if you don't have Chinese brushes, that's okay to use synthetic. That imitates the natural fibers, some organic fur, and so 2 equal size of brushes, so because, well, I find them the most helpful. So it's a bit rounded, and this one, well, so actually no matter what type of it, so you can use this. Well, fine, and 2 equal brushes to work, so one with paint, another one just clean. Well, and the same about colors. So I recommend you to use acrylic colors, all-purpose colors, and relying on the palette that we have today. So I use white color. So and actually we are going to mix white color with everything that we actually paint in this design. So brown or burnt umber, and so cobalt. So in different proportions we are going to mix them together. So, and if we start with painting the branch, I guess that first we need to take some white color and a tiny portion of brown and a very, very tiny portion of blue. So because it's going to somehow reduce its brightness and give it a sort of like very, very natural taupe shade. Well, add some water and mix it. So this is a sort of like a very neutral tone that we use to feel the body of the branch. Afterwards, we're going to intensify it in the shadow. So we can apply one layer after another in the shadow. And now actually the body of the tree or a branch, it gains its volume. Well, and we need to mark the place where we have the leaf stems. Yeah, here it is. Well, now we are to wait because the paper is wet, but actually if you paint it straightforwardly on a piece of fabric, you will understand that, so on the fabric surface, the paint dries very, very fast. So that's why you, well, have really minimum time for decision taking. Well, so now we are going to add to this mixture a tiny portion of blue and a tiny portion of brown. So actually we try to rely the same palette, but with slight difference. So now we are going to fill the leaves. So still the palette is almost the same, but actually with a little bit grayish color. So this mixture is for filling the leaves. So I guess that we even need to add some water. Well, So now it looks like absolutely transparent gray. And this is the basic color for the leaves that we are painting. So when we fill all the leaves, we are going to wait a little bit, and then we will work on the shadow parts. And so while waiting till the leaves dry, so we're going to add some shadow on the stem of the branch. Yeah, and here is the tiny leaf. Well, now waiting. So now let's have a look on the branch because it's almost dry, actually totally dry. And now we add a little bit of brown to make some accents in the shadow. So actually first we can draw a tiny line, and now take this dry brush and slightly wash this line to the center of the branch. So now it looks like a bit even more rounded. So when here approaching to the end of this branch, we make it very, very translucent and kind of fading, because it looks like this branch goes far from us. And the same thing about this line. And now let's slightly wash it. Well, and the same about this tiny twig and this tiny twig. Just make it a little bit contrastive. And afterwards, when we fill the leaf with the shadow, we're going to work on these twigs as well. Yeah. So now we are to take a fine brush and separate the part of the branch which is just on the other side, so which is a bit lighter. So we are to draw a very, very fine line there, so to make it separated from the background. So when you are going to paint straightforwardly on the fabric piece, so you are going to see how it looks, because so especially making a very fine and very sharp lines is going to be a bit tricky, because the fabric is not as even as a piece of watercolor paper, so it can be different. So that's why after painting, so it would be easy to add sharpness there while using the threads, because a series of stitches, very fine stitches done with embroidery thread or rayon silk, so it's gonna be really like game changing. Well, now how about the shadow? So apply the same color that you used while filling the leaves. So the leaves are totally dry, so take the second brush and apply intensive color all along the edge of the leaf, and now spread it. Well, it's very dry, we need to add some water. Well, and wash it. Yeah, the same about this part of the leaf, add the color and wash it. Well, here and now in the bottom, spread it, and here So, but here I guess that we need not to add so much. Yeah, just very accurately. And the same about this leaf. A tiny addition of more contrastive. Wow. So actually it's possible to add a touch of white, but not so much. So it would really look better if you use white in the fabric, especially if you use the background which is not white, so which is like off-white or maybe brown or even darker. So white, a touch of white would really serve nicely. Now actually we are wait a little. So I have golden brown, or not golden brown, so it's metallic browns. So it's very thick. And I feel like I need to dissolve it slightly. Yeah. So, and add a couple of like bronze touches in the shadow. And when leaves dry, we will add the veins on the leaves using this color. So to connect the shadow in the branch with the shadows and the accents on the leaves. Actually, using this color, we can add sort of like roughness on the branch, so some sort of like unevenness and texture. Well, so just a moment, and the leaves we're going to paint. Yeah. Actually, you can use hair dryer so to make it faster, but while painting on a piece of fabric, so you will not need hair dryer, so because it is going to dry it yourself. Yeah. Well, but I think that we need to take a small portion of it. So before painting the lines and before painting the veins, I think that so it would really help you to draw just a straight line, practicing the stability of your hand. So just take a brush and paint, take a brush and paint a sort of like hairy lines. So because while doing this practice, you will feel more confident. Well, and now let's make it. Yeah, it's completely dry. And now let's do it. Yep. Well, and now the veins. And another side. And here. And here. Well, so here you may not add lots of details because, well, we feel it like this leaf is just in the distance. So that's why add there just a couple of touches. Well, here we have. So now the bamboo, and as I've already told you about the bamboo, well, it really has a kind of bony structure. So it also reminds us sort of like bones that human body has. So on the top side, it's very thin, but while so going to the ground, it somehow becomes a little bit wider. So that's why we just try to imitate this while drawing. And actually bamboo twigs have different sizes and different length. So, but we're just rely on their natural look and natural parameters. Well, I feel like so we can use gray for painting bamboo, or so the gray that we use for leaves can also be very nice to paint. So we just apply some color and we'll add some water there. So to make the body. So now we're just trying to fill the space with very watery mixture of color, just to give it body a little bit. So when this coloring dries, so again we are going to add some sharpness with fine brush and add in there some shadow and contour. And then when everything dries, if we see that so there is not enough sharpness, we can again add a couple of strokes. But so on the piece of fabric, the situation can be absolutely different. And so while practice, I'm sure you will understand what I'm talking about. So especially while painting, so we can feel that the picture is really just blurred. So so the situation with sharpness can be really changed while adding stitches, long and short. And so these stitches can construct the darkness, and especially if we use light color threads, so they can construct the light. Well, now it dries, and using a very fine brush, we again try to make gray color, so that we add cobalt blue and burnt umber. So in here we have a nice mixture of blue-brown, but I feel it just like a very tarnished silver. Well, and now we contour it. In the light part and slightly in the dark. And because, as I have already told you, so the bamboo has ribs on its twigs, on its branches, so we are to add there some rib-looking lines. Well, and the same story about the joints. So because we really need to work them out Well, it looks like human bones. So there is no need to paint equally, so all the twigs, all the bamboo plants, because some of them are closer to the viewer and some of them are at slight distance. So that's why, well, no need to make them equally sharp and equally detailed. We'll just do some exercising. And get just the basic principle. So don't forget about light, don't forget about darkness, and so where we set the shadow and where we are just drawing some details. So stitching and embroidery is going to change the whole story. Yeah. Well, and now the flowers. So you can also upload the template with the flower pattern. So, but well, if you are very handy with drawing and with coloring, so you are well free to use pencil and do some coloring exercises using it. Just relying on the classic Chinese drawings, you can make a nice looking peony flower with really fluffy petals. Well, and here in the bottom we're going to make a plum flower. It has 5 petals and they are slightly overlapping one another. So we're going to paint the petals, and the heart of the flower is going to be stitched with French knots. So actually the peony flower is also going to be both colored and stitched, but the area which is in the shadow is going to be just only painted, and the surface just close to the petal edge is going to be stitched with fine white silk thread. So, and all the stitches should be placed in just in the way that so somehow the radiant or maybe the sunbeams are going to shine. So that's why, while after painting, we're going to just stitch the surface with some directions. So especially while painting on the surface of the fabric. So, and to rely to the stitches while filling the space with thread. Well, and now we're going to add there a couple of buds, yeah, and here. Well, now let's color it. So let's add a little bit of water. So gray is nice. And now let's fill the petals and put there some shadow. So in the base of the petal and in the area where the petals kiss. So the space which is close from the viewer drops a shadow to the whole petal. Well, so that we're going to spread this shadow all over the petal. So when the petals are completely colored, we're going to contour the flower using contrastive shade very close to the primary color that we use for painting the flower. Okay, now we wait till it gets a little bit less watery and switch to the plum flower. Well, so let's add it a little bit brownish, light brownish or beige, golden beige color. So, and feel the flower, the petals and the buds, and wait for a while. So because the shadow here is gonna be just the same palette that we use here, but I guess that it's better to play with bluish gray in order to, well, so to have this old composition in one color palette. Well, and also we are going to add there in the peony flower a little bit contrastive colors of, well, golden brown, but it should be washed. It should not be the very, very bright. Well, I guess that we can do this already. So take a little bit brown and add some touches and wash it a little bit. So it will look like a bit silverly gray with some accents of blue and brown. Well, now we wait and switch to the plum blossoming. So here we add some touches of gray where the petals kiss. So they're gonna be light area, shadowy area, shadow. And some touches in the flower buds. So slightly it gains some volume. And let's add some intensity. So actually Chinese and Japanese painting is very different from what, for example, Europeans got used to. So because, well, I just remember how I was trained to paint using watercolors when I studied at art school. So, and it was a sort of like very impressionistic expression of what we try to paint. So because we were trained to sense the beauty, but never be very precise in every stroke. So, but here we really need to wash every touch of brush that comes to a paper. Well, and the stem. So I feel like there should be more contrast. Oh yeah, so the same contrastive color is going to be used while contouring. So now we take fine brush and try to add the contour to the peony, following the shape of the petals. Well, if you feel like the stroke is very intensive, just take a dry brush and clean it with it. Just wash it, so that is gonna be okay. Well, and here it's a little bit of brown color. So we can also use here bronze tone. Wait till it dries and add a contrastive heart and slightly wash it. So in the heart we're going, so actually in the textile background, we're going to set a series of French knots. So afterwards the surface is gonna be just a little bit raised. So and the petals and the flower is gonna be plain, just only painted. Well, and add some contours. Brown or golden brown or browns, so it's up to you. So I do it with a slight bronze shade. Also, you can add there some highlight using white. So especially it will be effective in the colored background of the fabric. So because when the background is white, so we do not see the difference. But when the background is colored, so it really changes everything. Well, so here we have our exercise. So since the bird it's not like too complicated because it doesn't have really tricky elements like, for example, peony has, or like the leaves in the branch. So I don't really give it to you as an exercise. But anyway, so while practicing and repeating all these exercises, just step by step, you will get enough confidence in order to process the big design that we are going to do. So just exercise and experiment, repeat the basic exercises. So, and afterwards, you will understand that you really get prepared for some more designs, especially so connected with embroidery and painting. So, and I just feel it like, well, afterwards you're going to gain some superpower and will be ready for other type of embroidery and other type of designs. So, and maybe decorate a series of other home decor objects, or maybe other sort of like things to embellish your beautiful house, or maybe to give as a sort of present to your loved ones. So do the exercising, practice painting. So, and soon we're going to meet at other exercises. Well, it might look a bit hard, but don't worry. So do it in small chunks. So first we're going to do some painting, and afterwards we're going to add there some like tiny stitches. So in the end we're going to assemble all the frame, so in full, and frame it in baguette. So, and together I think it would be a really nice thing to do and to accomplish. And I would really feel incredible. And I would be really happy if you share some of the stages, some of the episode of creation that you go through on your social media, or maybe if you have some questions, you can also ask and share so the results of your work so in the net. I think that now we're approaching the end of this video story because, well, it was just like half theoretical and half practical, and I hope that so you find this practical side kind of like helpful and resourceful. So enjoy stitching, enjoy painting. So do the exercises, practice, and well, do the efforts to polish your skills in stitching and painting, and share your ideas. So I would really happy to accompany you in this way, because so you make me happy supporting me in my creative practice. So see you soon, and bye.